After the tone, please state your name followed by the pound sign.
Series put on by the State Rehabilitation Council. My name is Kathy Jablinski, and I sit on the State Rehab Council and want to thank all of you for joining us today for this very important topic. Our presenter today is Dr. Bob Stensrud with Drake University. He will be speaking with us today on the business case for hiring people with disabilities, what employers want to know. Dr. Stensrud is a professor in the Leadership, Counseling, and Adult Development Department at Drake University. He has published over 60 professional articles and book chapters in the area of employment, disability, and service integration. He is consulted as an external evaluator with state agencies regarding knowledge, translation, and systems change for Vocational Rehabilitation and Workforce Investment Act partner agencies. Prior to his time at Drake University, Dr. Stensrud managed a healthcare consulting operation through St. Louis University Medical Center that helped Catholic healthcare organizations improve business operations while maintaining their Catholic identity. This involved executive team development, strategic planning, strategic human services planning, service integration, and organization-wide turnarounds. He grew up in a family business that is now based in Northwood, Iowa, doing business as ADA Enterprise, an agricultural manufacturer. Welcome again, and Dr. Bob, thank you so much for joining us. I will turn the meeting over to you. Before I do that, I would like to take a minute here to thank our sponsors for putting on this event today. All right, Dr. Bob.
Great. Thank you, Kathy. It's nice to be talking to people today. And like she said, I've been part of a family business pretty much all my life, and we have hired people and fired people and done everything we can to keep people employed. At this point in time, we in Iowa are facing interesting challenges simply because we talk to a number of folks who have difficulty filling positions. So I think this is a really timely topic in terms of how we can help businesses find qualified people to put in their slots. So I'm excited about doing this today. So if we go to the next slide, I can talk a little bit about what the issue is from the business perspective. What we want when we fill a position, we want to begin with a pool of qualified applicants. We like to feel that if we are filling a position that we have plenty of people out there for us to choose from, and we like to feel that the people that we review are all going to be qualified in terms of skills and abilities. We all have hard-to-fill positions. There are some positions that are much more difficult to find qualified people, and again, that's something that we see vocational rehabilitation being able to help us with. As we do our planning, they can step in and say, okay, we see these positions are going to be coming open in the next few years, and we can start working with our clientele to find people who would be interested in filling them. So we want our qualified applicants. We want to have a large stack of applicants. I remember seeing huge stacks of applicants coming in for positions and enjoying going through them and finding the people that seemed like they would be a good fit. The best person for the job has the skills, and they clearly show in their resume and their interviews that their skills are exactly what we want. They will be able to do the job, they'll be able to do the job well, and they show us that they have the right attitude. This day and age, we're hearing a lot more about millennials and the attitude of millennials, but even among them, when we interview skilled people, we find folks who have an attitude that I want to work, I want to contribute, and I want to be part of an organization that believes in me and believes in my career. That becomes part of the best fit. Just because I've got an attitude where I want to work hard, just because I have the skills doesn't mean I will fit with a specific organization. What we watch a lot of times is, even early on back in high school, some people are interested in working with their hands, Some people want to work outside, some people want to work inside, some people like working with computers, some people don't. Some people like working alone. Some people like working in groups, being part of a team. So along with the skills and the work attitude, we want to feel like this person can fit in with our organization and be part of a larger team. Next slide. What we don't want when we fill a position is we don't want to post a position and not get any qualified applicants. As we go around the state, I'm hearing more and more people talk about how they have positions they would love to fill, but they just don't have enough applicants. And the applicants they do have don't have the skills they need. They may have some of the skills or some of the other skills, but finding the right skills to match what we want is difficult. It's like every organization has certain really hard to fill slots. And for those folks, the longer we can hear about those options and have lead time, the more likely it is that vocational rehabilitation can identify people interested in those careers, get them the training they want, and help them be ready to move in to fill the slots. What we call it in the Des Moines area is the skill pipeline. And so we can help people get entry-level jobs and then continue to partner with the employer to move the people up the ladder, adding skills as they go until they slide right into those slots that they're having a difficult time filling. So those kinds of things are possible. If we get people with the wrong skills, unfortunately, we have to let them go. And everybody in business knows that it costs about almost a year's salary in many cases to fire someone who was not a good match in the first place. Same thing with the wrong attitude. You may have somebody with the skills, but they don't get along with others. They really are indifferent, and their goal is just to work, get their paycheck, and go home, rather than be part of the organization, rather than want to fit in. So if I don't want to fit in, I'll just do my job and go away. Maybe they do the job, but without them being part of the team, the organization suffers. So as an employer, what I'm looking for are people who will not only have the skills and the attitude to contribute, but to be part of the team. So if somebody slips, they're there to help catch them. So when they slip, there'll be people there to help with them. So the teamwork is the best way we know to keep productivity up, having people work together well, have good attitudes, and have the skills everybody needs to get the jobs done. Next slide. Okay, so what can vocational rehabilitation do to help? Well, again, if you don't have applicants for positions and vocational rehabilitation knows this in advance, they can be out recruiting. Right now, under the new federal legislation, vocational rehabilitation is reaching into the high schools, even reaching into the middle schools to identify kids with interests in certain areas, talents in certain areas. So we did work with, as consultants, with a rural hospital that was having a hard time finding nurses. There are people who want to be nurses, they just didn't want to stay in the small town and work for that hospital. So we worked with them to get candy stripers in middle school, part-time workers and volunteers in high school. So by the time they graduated and wanted to get a nursing degree, they were pretty well bonded to the organization. Vocational rehabilitation can help with that. We can find people from around the state and bring them in. So if you need to recruit more people, see what kinds of resources vocational rehabilitation can provide. In terms of the wrong skills, a person with a disability who's a vocational rehabilitation client can have their training paid for. Voc Rehab can pay for them to get a certificate, to get a degree, to be certified with specific skills, and even after they start working, if the skills are changing that they need to demonstrate, Voc Rehab can come in and continue to pay for training. So if skills are a problem, Voc Rehab is there to help cover the training costs to get those skills. In terms of the wrong attitude, Voc Rehab can pay for trial work periods. If a person is showing the skills but we're not sure about the attitude, we can partner with a business and come in. We'll work together. If the person works out, that's great. If the person doesn't, then we'll get some feedback on why they don't and help them find some other place. So the fact that Voc Rehab can pay for trial work periods is a no-risk way for businesses to go, I think I'm going to like this person, but I'm not sure. In terms of not fitting in, sometimes what we see is it's difficult for outsiders to join an existing team. Sometimes we see that there are reluctances to hiring a person with a disability because they're not sure they can do the job. They're not sure how to work with the person on a job. So if there seems to be a problem with fit, Voc Rehab can come in and they can train employees. They can train employees on how to work with people with disabilities, sensitivity training, management skills. So whether it be the wrong skills, the wrong attitude, or just not fitting in, there are ways that vocational rehabilitation can reduce those risks for businesses. So instead of just carrying the risk yourself, you've got somebody to help carry that burden. The point I want to make more than anything else is that disability only matters if you think it matters. Disability doesn't have to matter. For me as an employer, I want to hire the best person for the job. If that person does not have a disability, I want to hire them. If they do have a disability, I want to hire them, and I want to figure out how to make the disability not matter. That's what Voc Rehab can do. I mean, Voc Rehab is there, and if you say, this person has the best skills, they got the best attitude, they're going to make the best fit, then there are things that we can do from Voc Rehab's perspective to make it work. We can help you find and employ people. We can help design and pay for accommodations. Here's the skills, here's the attitude, here's the fit. What do we need to do about accommodations? Do we need equipment, technology, any of those things? Let us know. That's what Voc Rehab is there to help with. Next slide. I interviewed a business, a nationwide business, considered one of the better companies to work for in the state. Clearly must have been considered one of the better companies to work for because they had more people applying for the job than they had jobs. I mean, everybody knew this was the place to work. We want to work there because of the way employees are treated, the way people work together, the way people count on each other. And I asked the HR person, how many people with disabilities do you have working for you? And the person said, we don't have any. And I was kind of surprised at that. And so I said, well, really? Well, you mean nobody in the organization needs accommodations? To which the person responded, well, everybody needs accommodations. So we don't worry much about the disability. We just worry about how do we make whatever accommodations our workers need. We hire these people. We think they're the best people we could get. And we're going to make sure that we can keep them working for us. So the kinds of accommodations that they provided, the kinds of accommodations a lot of companies provide, are just in terms of onboarding. So you're new, how do we help orient you to the organization? How can we get you to fit in? What can we do to get you to meet people, feel comfortable in your job, feel comfortable in your relationships? Coaching. What do we do? How do we have somebody there as a mentor to make sure that you are confident, that you feel like you're really contributing, that you feel like you are part of the team? And then training. Jobs always change. There's no job that I take to begin with and I stick very long to my job description before I have to change it. So no matter who the person is, disability or not, we're going to be providing onboarding, coaching, and training. Those are things that Voc Rehab can help with. Those are things that normal accommodations are. The next thing that accommodations do is they provide support from supervisors and coworkers. One of the things that we're finding actually is as the job market gets better for workers, they are moving. The ones who are moving to other jobs are the ones who are not happy with the way they're treated by supervisors or coworkers. So the more talented you are, the more you will find a place where you're treated the way you want to be treated. So the accommodations here are how do we support supervisors to be effective as supervisors? How do we support and accommodate coworkers so that they know how to work as a team? And then, again, other accommodations that everybody needs, not necessarily things that Voc Rehab can help with, but in terms of administrative supports, people need accommodations like sick leave, family leave, vacations, job duty adjustments, flexible hours for various reasons, accommodations such as technology, this kind of computer, this kind of software, these kinds of machines. And then the family business, being in northern Iowa, there are accommodations for times of year because the best workers we have need to go hunting, fishing, and go to Hawkeye games. So again, these are just accommodations. We make them for everybody. Thinking that only people with disabilities need accommodations is the big mistake here. We all need them. The accommodations allow us to do our jobs well, and the accommodations allow us to feel like our employer respects and appreciates us. So we're not talking about anything magical when we think about accommodations, which is a word that people worry about when we think of disabilities. Accommodations are everywhere, and some of them are more creative than others, such as hunting and fishing. Anyway, we can also help with accommodations. So one of the things that Voc Rehab can do is they can go in and they can do a job analysis. And they can analyze the way work is done, and they can make recommendations for modifying the job so that a person who has the skills otherwise can do the job. So a minor modification here is going to allow a person with a disability to do it. But these job modifications are good for everybody. One of the things that we hear about are the number of back injuries that people get at work and how much time is lost to back injuries. In many cases, job modifications can relate to how to place objects so that nobody gets a back injury. So not only do these modifications help people with disabilities, they help all workers. Voc Rehab can provide workspace modifications. How can we design the space so that anybody is more comfortable? We change chairs, we raise tables, we find different ways to move space around so that a person with a disability can do the job. But, you know, lo and behold, a lot of times the older workers appreciate the same accommodations that the people with disabilities appreciate. So we are, again, not just accommodating people with disabilities, we're accommodating the whole workforce. Voc Rehab can provide assistance with equipment and technology. So again, you can get a better computer screen, a better mouse, you can get an adjustment so that a person can use a keyboard without developing carpal tunnel. Technology can be purchased then, so a person can hear what's on the computer monitor as opposed to just having to read it. A number of things. So when a Voc Rehab counselor comes in and does a job analysis, there are recommendations to make it possible to hire this person with a disability. Also involves recommendations that the equipment and technology will be beneficial to everyone. Voc Rehab can come in, they have people who can provide training in using accommodations. So we have accommodations, they're here for people with disabilities. Voc Rehab can come in and train on how to use them, and they can train other workers on how to use them. So the training in using accommodations is one of the things that can make it a more injury-free environment for everybody. And again, like my last point here, this is really part of injury prevention. Early on in healthcare, we had a company called Healthline, and what it would do is it would go out and do occupational hygiene, occupational health. How can all of these job modifications make it less likely that anybody gets injured, makes it more likely that anybody can do the job? The more we do that, the fewer injuries we have, the fewer work comp claims, the fewer days away from work because of illness or injury. So all of these things not only, again, are accommodations that help people with disabilities get jobs and keep jobs, they're there for everyone to use. Next slide. So what's stopping us? Well, when we've talked with businesses in detail, one of the things we hear a lot of is the risk of the unknown. Are we concerned about people with disabilities because we don't know what it's like? Are we concerned about people with disabilities because we have stereotypes about them? Quite often when I say I teach rehabilitation counseling, people think it's drug rehab. So the stereotypes about what a disability is hang there. The unknown is there for all applicants, really, and so the sense of risk that we get from this is not something that should be scary. It's something that the more you work with a rehab counselor up front, the more you know about the situation, the less risk of the unknown there is. And so the partnership between businesses and Voc Rehab really is a wonderful way to reduce any sense of risk, or certainly minimize it. And again, if it doesn't work out, there are ways to start a person in a job at Voc Rehab's cost, and then at some point say, okay, well, I guess it's not going to work, so we'll take it away. So it becomes almost like a no-risk relationship. Another thing that's stopping us is the screening method for applications. More and more, the applications are being done online, and computers are used to search through the applications to look for the right word. And if the right word is not part of the screening process, a person who would be qualified is bumped out of the queue. We see this with a lot of applicants. We see a lot of people work in one part of an industry, so they use a certain word for something. Then they apply for a job that's in a different company, and that company uses a different word. So qualified applicants all over are losing out on these opportunities because of the screening methods that are not flexible enough to handle that. Another thing specific to people with disabilities in the application process, their disability may have kept them out of the workforce for a while. So I know we look for certain things in the work record. We look for steady employment. We look for progressive employment. But sometimes the disability is going to disrupt that. So again, the more we know about the person up front, the more we consider this, the more we can say, okay, I understand why there's a gap in employment. The people with disabilities may have taken longer to get through school. They may have taken longer to get some different skills. One of the things we've seen with the NCRC, the National Career Readiness Exam, is that when it's given at the Workforce Center, people who take it will then end up getting a certificate that says their level of skill. You can be a platinum, you can be a gold, but you get a certificate that says this. If you need an accommodation, you still score, you still get your scores. You can still be a platinum or a gold, but because there was an accommodation, you do not get a certificate. So if the application screening method says, what was your NCRC certificate, these people will not have them. And that has nothing to do with their scores on the exam or their competence. It just has to do with the way the American College Testing Company gives out the certificates. Another thing that we still get is a misunderstanding of the Americans with Disabilities Act. We have had people making money going around scaring businesses, saying, oh, you have to be careful of hiring a person with a disability because if you hire them and they don't work out, you're going to get sued. Voc Rehab can send people out and explain the Americans with Disabilities Act so that you're comfortable knowing how it works. Most large companies have people in place who know this. Smaller companies, maybe not necessarily. But you only have to provide reasonable accommodations if the person's the best fit. You don't have to go out of your way, and you still have Voc Rehab to help pay for those accommodations. If the person's performance is not satisfactory, there is nothing wrong with saying, I'm sorry, we can't keep you, as long as it's a work performance issue. So the ADA has been turned into a monster that it really never was and never was intended to be. Voc Rehab can work with you so that you understand that's not going to be a problem. Another thing we see, at the last point here, is supervisor and coworker concerns about productivity. Especially as we talk to the small manufacturers, they are part of a supply chain. We make this one piece and we hand it on to this company to do the next step. Somebody does this step, hands it to us, we do this, then we hand it on. And so we have to move in a timely and very productive way. If we are not sufficiently timely, if we are not sufficiently productive, our whole team will get shut down. My whole company will get shut down, and it'll be outsourced to some other company. So there is a serious concern by supervisors and coworkers anytime a new person is brought in. Will this person carry their load? Will this person be dependable enough to do what needs to be done so that we deliver our product the way we're supposed to, the time we're supposed to, at the cost we're supposed to? And any person who can't do that shouldn't be working. But just because a person has a disability doesn't mean they can't do that. Again, Voc Rehab has ways to help understand. Can the person do the job? Can they do the job the way it's supposed to be done? If the person cannot do it, then they're not appropriate. If the person can do it, then the disability should not matter. And these kinds of relationships, as you partner with Voc Rehab, you're going to find that the people they bring you, the training they provide for you, is going to be sufficient to get the job done. And so the last slide is really about what we would like you to do for us. Voc Rehab would like to work with businesses. The new Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act wants Voc Rehab to partner with other agencies, to partner with businesses, and have businesses sit in on meetings and say, this is what we need from you. The best way for Voc Rehab to do what you need is to tell them, okay? Sit down and say, here's my problem, here's what I need done. My counseling background as a consultant really came in handy. I would sit down with somebody over lunch and I'd just listen to them tell their problems. And as they told me their problems, I could figure out how best to help them. And it's the same here. I mean, these are counselors who know how to listen, who know how to help solve problems. So sit them down and say, here are the problems I have today. I also have a workforce that's aging, and I see these problems coming down the line. So I need to deal with these problems now, and I need to be prepared to deal with these problems in the future. If I can't keep my workforce, I'm not going to keep my business open. I need the people to keep going, and I want to stay where I am. A lot of small businesses in rural Iowa have told us that they want to stay in the small towns. They want to support the small towns. They're just worried about finding the people to fill their jobs. So with Voc Rehab, start by inviting them out. See the business. Give them a tour. Show them how things work. Show them how all of the operations function so that they have a better sense of what your business is like. Explain it. Sit down and say, this is what we do. This is how we do it. This is how we have to do it in order to stay open. If we're going to stay open, we need to get these things done in this amount of time under this cost. And the more the rehab counselors understand about that, the easier it will be for them to say, okay, now I have a much better sense of where you're going. Then we can see, here's what I need today, here's what I'm going to need in the future, and here are my human resources concerns. I want this kind of person because they fit into the culture that we have. Some cultures are more like a family. Some cultures are more like an athletic team, and some cultures are much more competitive. So talk to us about how you want your culture to work, what the HR concerns are in terms of what you can pay, what benefits you have, what things you can't do for people. Now that we've seen your business, you've explained your business, we have a sense of the kinds of people you need now and in the future, We have a sense of the kinds of HR concerns that you have in terms of what you can and can't do to support people. Then just tell us what kind of work preparation and training we should provide so that we give you the best worker. Again, the purpose of Voc Rehab is not to put a person with a disability in a job no matter what. The purpose of Voc Rehab is to make sure that when you go out to hire the best person, that we find the best person for you and we make the disability not matter. It shouldn't matter if we do our jobs. It shouldn't matter if we have helped you find the best person and helped you make sure that that person has all the resources necessary to excel at what they're doing. So really, it's just let us know your disability-related concerns. Let us know your HR concerns. Let us know the things that you're concerned about in terms of other people getting injured and how to stop injuries and accidents from happening. Those kinds of things can be useful in figuring out who best to send to you and figuring out how to help you keep the people that you have. And then finally, it's really just keep in touch. There are a lot of Voc Rehab counselors out there. They've got big caseloads, but they also have people who are really serious about just keeping in touch, touching base on the phone, coming out and seeing how things are going. The best relationships we have are with the people that have been satisfied with us in the past. So you hire somebody, if you like them, keep in touch, let us know when somebody else comes along. And we know better how to help you, and you know better how to take advantage of what we do. Keeping in touch involves not just talking with a counselor, but vocational rehabilitation is part of something called the Employer Disability Resource Network. The EDRN is a statewide service that is designed with a website, with people behind the website, so that if you have a disability question, you can get onto the website and ask it, and somebody with an answer will get back to you. So not only do we have individual counselors and regional offices, but we have a statewide resource full of people from Voc Rehab and other agencies who, if you've got a disability-related question, they can find somebody to give you an answer. So in essence, that's pretty much what I wanted to go over today. Our business, we have hired a lot of people. We've lost people because it's manufacturing and they've gotten hurt. We've learned from that how to make our business less dangerous, less hazardous. So we take the best people we can and we figure out how to make disability not matter. And we know how to work with Voc Rehab to get that done. We still can't turn them into University of Northern Iowa fans, but I'm working on that. So anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bob. I do have a few questions for you as a follow-up, and I will open the questions up to anyone that's on this recording today as well. And I'm glad that you touched on the point of, you know, we're here for you to answer questions. The organization that I work for, Manpower, we have a very close relationship with Voc Rehab. And one of the starting points for us was really about creating the relationship. And the team at Voc Rehab, at the local level, at the state level, did such a great job of making us feel comfortable asking questions that we were afraid to ask and providing answers to us. We needed the answers, and they made it just a welcoming situation and environment so that we could move that needle forward in hiring people with disabilities. I think there are a lot of myths out there, and you mentioned several of them earlier in your presentation, and they are a fantastic resource and have been for us. So my question for you, you mentioned the kind of the pre-screening process, that Voc Rehab can really partner with you, with companies on the pre-screening process, but just in general for the employers that are listening in today, can you give some recommendations on how employers can accommodate their pre-screening requirements? I think many today, as you mentioned, they have online applications, but they also might have online assessments that candidates need to take. And so you think about someone with maybe a visual impairment might struggle to complete that assessment, or it's a timed assessment. And, you know, someone who has a learning disability might not be able to complete that assessment in the time allowed. What recommendations do you have for employers to address this?
Well, and part of the recommendation is for the voc rehab personnel. So if they are out getting to know a business and knowing the kinds of screening processes they use, they can say, this may be a barrier to some really qualified people. If I have someone who seems qualified, what can we do to give them an alternative to it? I think one of the things that we've seen a lot is that too often we interact with only the HR people, and then we don't get to interact with the frontline supervisors. The people, whenever we go through an organization, the people who feel the risk of hiring the most are the hiring manager and the frontline supervisor. They're afraid that they will carry the risk of a bad hire. And in many cases they do. So if we can have relationships with them and review their screening process and say, here's something that you may want to do in an alternate way to help someone get through it, that would be something that I would be willing to help you with. I can help you find alternative methods. If I have someone or if I know someone who seems qualified and this will be a barrier, I can bring them out and introduce them to you as part of an interview. So the partnership can extend to us helping a business explore how to modify their screening process and also how to bring someone in and negate the negative impact of that process. I have to tell you, when people look for workers, more and more they go to their social networks and say, do you know someone who will fill that job? And the people that I as an employer trust are really the ones who give me the best referrals. And if somebody I trust says, I've got this great applicant, they just can't do this one thing on the screening process, I'm going to find a way around it. I'm going to find a way to check the person's skills without that being a barrier. So those personal relationships, if we trust each other, we can find a way around it. And I think that's really Voc Rehab's job, to keep in touch, know your business, and help you figure out when those things get in the way.
So the assessment process is one piece of that pre-screening, so remembering that, but relying on other ways to verify somebody's skills. Great points there. Another question that I have for you are, what are some interview do's and don'ts? You know, your interview process with any candidate. Are there some do's and don'ts that stand out to you?
Back to my point that a disability only matters if it matters. So what I will do is I will ask you if you can perform the essential functions of the job. And I will ask you if you can perform them with accommodations. And I'm not going to ask you, do you have a disability? I'm going to focus on your ability to do the job. And if you need accommodations, that comes at a later point. So, I mean, the do's and don'ts in the interview are really more about etiquette. If a person has an apparent disability, don't focus on it. Don't quiz them about it. It's just treat everybody like everybody else. Many of the disabilities we have are hidden disabilities, so we're not going to notice them anyway. So I think there is training. There's training on disability etiquette that Voc Rehab can bring out to the recruiters, the interviewers, the supervisors, and say these are ways to handle etiquette issues. But if my disability prevents me from performing the essential functions of the job, and any accommodations would not be reasonable, then I'm not appropriate for the job.
Thank you. I've had questions before. We work with a lot of manufacturers as well, and some questions have come up with, how would I accommodate an individual who might be sight impaired or hearing impaired? Safety is important to us, and I'm not sure how that would work. That does come up often. So I'm just curious if you could share maybe some best practices of, accommodations that have been put in place in a manufacturing setting that has helped us, hire that fantastic worker that's going to be loyal and do the job well, and meet the needs and keep everybody safe.
Well, in terms of visual, it's been interesting. There is a company that liked a person for a job, and the person was visually impaired. So Voc Rehab helped get the accommodations. In this case, it was the different monitors that needed to be larger. The screens needed to have larger print, and that's all the person needed. Once they've done that, once an organization has gone through making itself open to a person with a specific disability, they quite often come back and say, that person was great, can you send me somebody like that again? So it really is an issue of specific consulting where the job analysis shows up. Where does the visual impairment, where does the hearing impairment interfere with getting the work done? And again, our Voc Rehab counselors are very good at that. They're going in, they look specifically at the job. Here's the piece that the person can't do. Okay, can we accommodate this or not? I have the equipment, I have the technique, I have the resources to accommodate it. We've got the Job Accommodation Network, which is a national resource, and calling them will get assistance in terms of how to accommodate a specific job for a specific disability. But if it's not reasonably accommodatable, then the business does not have to do it. So it's only about reasonable accommodations. We have had people who have made it into an organization, they've gotten so far, and then their disability has not allowed them to move from one position to another because it was not a reasonable accommodation. So those things do happen. But the best resource you've got is the person doing the job analysis, looking at the specific barrier and saying whether or not there's a specific way to accommodate it.
And I think you often find as well when you put some of these different changes in place in an organization, other workers step forward and are so happy that you added that new technology or made that slight adjustment because it helps them do their job better as well.
Let me just say it again. I mean, we have an aging workforce, and there are a lot of jobs that will be very hard to replace when the person decides to leave. So as we make accommodations, especially for people who need visual or auditory accommodations, we are helping what they're calling the wisdom workers to feel like they can stay around if they want to. So if you're hard to replace but your vision is kind of going, the accommodations that Voc Rehab made for this person all of a sudden makes it much easier for this person to stay on their job. So every accommodation helps everybody.
Absolutely does. My final question for you is around a success story. I definitely see and understand the benefit of utilizing Voc Rehab as part of your recruiting strategy. It is definitely part of Manpower's recruiting strategy. We get fantastic referrals and placements, and ultimately these individuals fill our open job orders. Can you share a success story of a company maybe that you worked with that was proactively looking at a way to attract this talent pool to their organization, where they either worked with you or Voc Rehab to help put a strategy in place and what the outcome was for that organization.
Okay, well, I'll step back a little bit. There's a company in Europe, I believe it's Denmark, where the owner of the company, where he needed a lot of computer programming done, had a son whose disability was on the autism spectrum disorder. And as he put his son in that position, he realized that his son was very, very good at programming and was not distractible like other people. He was had much more attention to detail, fewer errors, and his son was the best programmer he had. So he went out and hired other people specifically because they were on the autism spectrum and loved them. And he's been traveling around the country, the U.S., talking about the success of his company and how there are jobs that are just almost perfect for people who are on the autism spectrum. So, yeah, I shared that with an IT company, and I happen to know the father of a young man who is on the spectrum, and the father said, well, I know somebody that I would put in there, and the father, the kid, and the company worked it out. So the kid is there, they love him, and he's delighted doing a job that he really enjoys, and he's better at it than a lot of the folks that they've gone through before. I think some disabilities are not necessarily a good fit for some jobs. Minneapolis has a restaurant that I know, and what they look for, they really want their chefs to have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. They say if you're going to be a chef in this restaurant, you have to be ADHD. So, I mean, as we get a better appreciation for the skills people bring to a job, the more we can match their strengths to the nature of the job. And some of these kids are delighted to get an opportunity, and they become fabulous workers, and other folks have to try and hold them back.
Great success story. Well, thank you again for joining us today, Dr. Cedar. We so appreciate it. And I'd like to thank everyone on behalf of the State Rehabilitation Council for the state of Iowa for joining us for this important topic. If you want to learn how you can tap into a workforce that is ready and excited to work, please reach out to your local vocational rehabilitation office to start the conversation today. Congratulations on your journey to build your bottom line by hiring individuals who have a disability. Thank you so much.